Hello, my name is Michael O'Reilly, and this presentation will cover Lab 2 for Physics 2212, which is lines of charge. So the main purpose and problem of this lab is to find charge matter on surroundings, but more importantly, how to treat charged objects and use a comparison of the data between Lab 1 and Lab 2. The main method of charging the Scotch tape is by contact, so in this case ripping. And then the main method of comparison between Lab 1 and Lab 2 that we'll be using is computational models. Some of the fundamental principles that this lab covers are the conservation of charge, charge behavior, and point charge electric fields. Some major assumptions to use in Lab 1 and covered in this lab is that each U-tape has the same net charge. In Lab 1, it allows us to find the charge of the top tape in the electric field equation. More importantly for this lab, another assumption is that each tape is a single line of charges. This will be further expressed in the diagram that the code makes. This is the main difference between this lab and Lab 1. Finally, another assumption is that the tapes do not lose any charge when touched. This means that contact does not alter the results. We are careful to only touch ends of the tape because ions from my hand can discharge the tape and alter the results negatively. For observations, we found that the U-tape is positively charged because it is attracted to the negatively charged pen. If it was negatively charged, it would attract the pen. We also cannot say the U-tape is neutral, as it was attracted to my hand, which is also neutral, along with being repelled by another positively charged tape as shown in the picture on the right. We found the mass of the floating tape, knowing that the length of the tape was 20 centimeters, and we found the force of gravity on the floating tape, along with the separation distance from tape 1 to tape 2 as shown in the diagram. Now onto the coding portion of this lab. So we see that the estimated net charge on the top tape is 2.87 nanocoulombs. The diagram on the right is the result of the nested for loops on the left. The bottom for loop calculated the electric force on the top tape due to the bottom tape, as represented by the green arrows shown in the diagram. The top for loop takes every point charge for the top tape, which is shown by the red spheres in the diagram, and sums them for the net electric force on tape 1 from tape 2, which is the white arrow. It also displays the force of gravity on tape 2. As you can see, the forces have the same magnitude, but in opposite directions. So the in-depth calculations in the lab are the number of electrons in deficiency and the fraction of atoms deficit in electrons. These calculations were found with ratios and the assumption that charges spread uniformly along the surface. The tape is plastic, so it is an insulator and therefore has no mobile electrons. So on to the comparison of the data between Lab 1 and Lab 2. In Lab 1, we use the electric field point charge, the momentum principle, and the charge assumption, and we treated the tape as one point charge, as all of its charge is in the center. In comparison, in Lab 2, we treat the tape as a line of point charges. We still use the charge assumption and determine that the charge of the tape is about 2.87 nanocoulombs. For the contrast of Lab 1 and 2, like I mentioned in the previous slide, in Lab 1 we treated the tape as one point charge in the center, but in Lab 2 we treat it as a line of charges across the tape. The value we calculated in Lab 2 is more accurate because plastic is an insulator, so charge remains in a place that electrons are lost. So charge is most likely spread out and stationary because an insulator has no mobile electrons. So finally, for the conclusion, the U-tapes are positive when charged by ripping. This charge is relatively small, and a small portion lose electrons. If the electrons were positive, the U-tapes would be negatively charged, would attract and repel each other. Also, they would have the same magnitude of charge and a different sign. Ultimately, Lab 2 lines of charges are more accurate than the single point charge that we used in Lab 1 due to plastic being an insulator and electrons not being able to spread out much across the surface. Thank you very much for listening.